Hello, and welcome to the Big Life NYC podcast. I'm Roderick Angle. In this podcast, we talk with longtime New Yorkers to gather their strategies and advice for having a great life in one of the toughest cities in the world. Today, my guest is Jamie Bernstein. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. By the way, it's Bernstein.
It is Bernstein.
Most people think it's Bernstein because that's the American pronunciation.
Right.
But my grandfather pronounced it Bernstein, so there you go.
Bernstein, okay. And I'm going to try to pronounce your mother's last name in a little bit.
Okay, I'll see how you do.
We'll see how that goes. So Jamie is an author, a narrator, a director, a broadcaster, and a filmmaker. She has appeared worldwide performing scripted concert narrations. She has produced and hosted the New York Philharmonic live national radio broadcasts, as well as many summer broadcasts at Tanglewood. Correct so far?
Correct so far.
Okay. Jamie is the daughter of Leonard Bernstein and Felicia Montealegre.
Not quite, but it was close.
Close. How is it?
Montealegre.
Montealegre.
Right.
Felicia Montealegre. Okay. I knew I was going to flub that.
It's okay.
She was born and raised and has lived the majority of her life in New York City. In her memoir, right here, Famous Father Girl, Jamie tells the story of growing up in a rarefied, creative environment that most of us can only read about. Whether it's treasure hunting with Stephen Sondheim or casually snapping Polaroids with Dick Avedon, Jamie grew up amidst the type of exclusive creative community that seems to flourish so often here in New York City. Right?
It's true.
Yeah. So, Jamie, your book, I found it to be really honest. It is about this kind of rarefied creative community you grew up in, but also it's kind of a warts and all portrait of an American family living in New York City in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. I know your father was obviously very talented and very famous, but besides that, I think anybody who comes from a family can relate to your book. So what was your inspiration for writing the book?
Well, you can imagine that my brother and sister and I get asked a lot, what was it like? Right. What was it like to grow up in this really unusual family with this larger-than-life father in New York City, sure. At the height of mid-20th century culture in America, New York City,
sure.
And what was it like? So my short answer that I devised for the journalists was, well, it wasn't boring. But the longer answer is my book. And the reason I had a book to write was precisely that there was so much to tell and so many cool stories. And it was really fun to take a deep dive, not just into my own family and how we all related to our dad and everything,
sure.
but also to really describe that era that we were growing up in.
Yeah.
Because it was so of its time, and New York is different now. The world
Absolutely.
is different now.
Yeah.
So I thought it was useful to give as accurate an account as I could assemble of what it was like to live in this environment back then.
Yeah, that's what I really loved about the book is this insight it gives you into a world that most of us just hear about, It was really, really great. I wanted to focus in on your teen years because I have a teenage daughter. She just started high school. So she's, taking the subway, going to high school in the West Side every day. What was your life like then for you at that time in your life? What were your teen years like?
Well, my teen years happened during the time that we were living in this fancy apartment on Park Avenue and 79th Street.
That's 895 Park, right?
Yeah, it was a duplex.
Right.
And it had a wraparound terrace, and it was upside down. The bedrooms were downstairs, and the, living room, dining room, kitchen, all that were upstairs.
Right.
And I was so lucky. My bedroom faced west, and I had 4 windows, one of which faced south, so I could see all the way down Park Avenue with the Christmas trees and the cross of lights on the Grand Central Station building and everything. It was a big eyeful. And then looking west through my 3 windows, I would behold every sunset of every day over the park, Wow. I mean, it was a lot. It was magnificent, and I knew it, and I really
Right.
loved every second that I had that experience.
Did you have an acknowledgement at that time, at that age, of how lucky you were, how special this was?
I knew it was pretty special. I mean, I don't think I understood entirely
Right.
how crazily unusual my life was.
Right. Right.
But I sure
How could
knew
you?
I had
Yeah.
the greatest bedroom in the whole wide world.
Right. Right.
That was just, I appreciated that eyeful every single day. And then in the winter, every single morning at about 6 a.m., there would be this one gigantic clank as the heat came on.
Oh.
Right? And then after
Some
that...
things do not change in New York City.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know. And then after that, it would just do its chugging and huffing and
Right.
all those millions of sounds that radiators make. But it would always begin with that first gigantic clank that would make me jump in my bed.
Wow.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. We work with Brown Harris Stevens and many other top real estate firms, staging their homes to sell quickly and at the highest price possible. Our staging is affordable without sacrificing quality or design. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Wow. So did you love New York City at that point? Like, at what point did you love living in this city?
It was that point. I would say it was when I was 15 in 10th grade. That
Right.
was the apex
Right.
of my infatuation with New York City, because my best friend lived in Greenwich Village
Right.
on West 9th Street, and I was down there all the time.
What was that
And
like then?
It was funky.
Yeah. And this
My
is this
friend-
what year is this?
We're
What-
talking. It was 1968,
Wow.
67, 68.
Wow.
So we still had the Women's House of Detention on 9th Street and 6th Avenue. That's exactly where my friend lived. So we were always out on the street and hearing all the people yelling up at the women in the Women's House of Detention.
Wow.
It was quite a scene.
I'm sure.
Plus, it was the hippie scene
Right.
was absolutely on fire. And so we would walk up and down 8th Street, and there were all the head shops and all the cool clothing stores, but we were a little too young for it
Right.
at the age of 15. And so we always had this sense of longing, this sense of FOMO, as we now say, fear of missing out.
Sure.
That we always felt like we were a little too young to really experience it all. But, we were starting to smoke pot, and
Right.
and the world was our oyster. And I remember walking with my friend Lynn through Central Park in the snow at twilight and just thinking, this is just the coolest thing in the whole wide world.
Wow.
You know the movie The World of Henry Orient? Have you ever seen that film?
No, I haven't. No.
It's one of the greatest films. And it's about these two teenage girls in New York City.
Wow.
And they filmed the exteriors of their school at my school.
Wow.
Really. So
Where was your school?
On 83rd Street and East End Avenue, like right on the river.
Okay.
And they filmed all the exteriors there. So we felt like that movie was just about us, wasn't it? And there were all
So
these...
great to be 15 and have a movie made about your life,
Totally.
Yeah.
It was magical.
Yeah, sounds magical.
So, and the movie beautifully captured this sense of ownership of the city, that it was
Wow.
just there for you to play in.
Wow. That's so great. I mean, my kids, from a very young age, I would say even a little earlier, 8, 9, 10 years old, they love New York City. And they came to me and they just said, we don't want to live anywhere else in the world. This is absolutely the best place to be. And such a great...
You were very nice to oblige them.
I was very nice to oblige them, and I continued to, yeah. So what was your neighborhood like the neighborhood where you lived in the Upper East at the time? Did you have neighbors to hang out with, or?
It was kind of boring.
Yeah.
I would say that all of us in my family were a little bored with the neighborhood. It was very kind of snooty and, Upper East Side.
Right.
And we always felt like we were a little too funky for the neighborhood.
Right.
So,
But it was close to your dad's work, right?
It was
I correct in
fairly
that?
close. Well, at that point, they had just built Lincoln Center.
Right.
The first building they finished was Philharmonic Hall, where he worked. So that was just a quick ride across town.
Right.
Before that, the New York Philharmonic was at Carnegie Hall, and in those years, we were still living in the Osborne,
Right.
which is exactly diagonal from Carnegie Hall. So that was the world's greatest commute
Right.
for my dad.
Right.
So once we moved to Park Avenue in 79th, he wasn't actually around the corner anymore.
Right. Okay.
But it still wasn't that
But he made
far
the
away.
sacrifice for the bigger, fancier apartment.
Yes, he made the sacrifice. But, we stayed in that apartment approximately 10 or 11 years. And then my mother especially had really had it with the dullness of the neighborhood.
Yeah,
And,
in the book, I think you refer to it as too waspy and homogenous.
well, there you go.
Right.
It was pretty waspy.
Right.
And just kind of predictably old school. And it didn't have a lot of artists
Right.
of any kind, really. And so in the year I graduated from college in 1974, our mother found this great apartment in the Dakota,
The storied Dakota.
the storied Dakota.
Dakota,
And so
wow.
we all moved back to the west side where all our pals were.
It was
And
big.
it was on the corner.
Right.
So the living room was on the corner of 73rd Street and Central Park West. And we were just on the second floor. So there were two things about that position. One, we could wave at James Levine, who lived in the next building north, also on the second
storied
floor.
New York tradition of waving
Yeah.
at your neighbors
So
through the window.
we could
yeah.
wave at Jimmy Levine.
Right.
And then the other thing was that it was so great on Thanksgiving morning to be
Yeah.
in that apartment. The living room and the library had little mini balconies. So it's a miracle we didn't break them because like 8 of us would pile out there
Right.
and watch the parade go by as if for us. You could wave like Queen Elizabeth
Right.
at the floats as they went by.
At your eye level.
Yeah, God, it was so much fun.
Well, the scene in the movie has that,
Yeah,
In
well-
if everyone hasn't seen Maestro, you should see Maestro. And there's a scene where the Thanksgiving floats are going by the window. It's
That's right.
incredible.
Snoopy, in fact,
Yeah,
goes
Snoopy,
right by the
yeah.
window. And in fact, Bradley Cooper got that whole detail about watching the parades from the Dakota from my book.
Right.
And
Cool.
he got the idea for, the scene where Lenny and Felicia are having this terrible argument as Snoopy floats past
It's
the
so
windows.
perfect.
Yeah, it's great.
It's really perfect. Wow, I didn't know that. And what were your neighbors like there? What was the community like at the Dakota?
It was pretty astonishing. There were a lot of remarkable people in the building in those years, including, let the name dropping begin,
Sure.
Rudolf Nureyev. He lived across the kitchen door from us.
Right.
So we saw him all the time. And then directly above us, 2 floors up on the 4th floor, was Lauren Betty Bacall.
Bogal. Right.
And she was a really close family friend, so she
Right.
was always popping in through the kitchen door.
Right.
What are you doing? Is anybody fun coming over for dinner? Can I? It was like that. It was
Right.
adorable.
That's crazy. It's so
Yeah,
so
but
cool.
we also had John Lennon.
Right.
And for me, as a dyed-in-the-wool Beatlemaniac, that was the biggest possible deal.
Of course. So did you get to know him? Did you meet
A
him?
little bit, yeah.
A little bit.
A little bit. They started having potluck parties
With
in
pot
October.
in quotes? With pot in quotes or?
Really not even in quotes. No. It was just people would bring food and everybody would gather in the courtyard of the Dakota. And it was fun because really everybody kept to themselves mostly. But there
Right.
you could run into your neighbors. And there was an occasion when my best friend Anne from school
Right.
and I,
Right.
we were now in our 20s, found ourselves in front of the dessert table right next to John Lennon.
Wow.
We were trembling. And everybody was trying to decide what to have. And John Lennon said, and we will never forget it, "I want something mushy and disgusting." And of course, we just fell down
Right.
and had to squeal for the rest of the evening.
So weird. I wonder what he ended up with.
Probably nothing, because actually he and Yoko were macrobiotic.
Right.
And they had a really boring macrobiotic station on the other side of the courtyard, with brown rice and really boring things. So really, John Lennon had no business being in front of the desserts.
Right. He was cheating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was cheating.
So you were at college at this time, right? Or
I had just graduated college
Just
when we
graduated college.
acquired the Dakota. So I actually did not live in the apartment
right.
that my parents acquired. My younger sister lived there.
Right.
But I didn't, and neither did my brother, except briefly. But eventually, I was just moving back to New York, and I was so young and with no direction yet.
Right.
And so, interestingly, all these big apartments in the Dakota came with a maid's room on the top floor.
Right.
And so this maid's quarters, apartment 126, was just one room. My mother built a little bathroom into it because the maids were all supposed to use this communal bathroom down the corridor.
Right.
But my mother built in a little bathroom, so it was like a little studio that I could live in until I figured out what to do
wow,
next.
that's great. So that was your crash pad after
college,
After
yeah.
college.
And that was great because then it was like being 1 foot in the family and 1 foot out.
Right.
It was kind of perfect.
Right.
So I could go downstairs whenever I felt like being taken care of or
Get your laundry done.
Yeah.
Important.
So important.
Yeah.
But then if I just wanted to go off and do my own thing, I totally could.
That's great.
So yeah, that worked very well.
Great. So were you around when John Lennon was killed?
Not only was I around, I was upstairs.
Oh, man.
At that point,
And when was that? 80s?
81, 82, something
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
And at that point, my mother was no longer alive. She died in 1978.
Okay.
And after she died, my father decided he wanted to have his studio in the apartment rather than in this other apartment on the 9th floor
Okay.
that we also had.
Right.
And so once he moved
So you had
down,
the main apartment, the other apartment, and the maid's quarters.
yeah, right. So once my father moved his studio downstairs, and at that point I was living in L.A.
Okay.
briefly. Whenever I came into the city, I would stay in what used to be my father's studio up on the 9th floor.
it, right.
So I was up there
Wow.
on that night, December 8th of whatever that year was. And I was playing the piano. I was at the time pursuing a career as a singer-songwriter.
Okay.
So I was up there, working out a song on the piano, and I heard what sounded like gunshots. And I stopped playing, and I thought, well, it must have just been a truck backfiring. We don't get gunshots on the corner of 72nd Street and Central Park West.
Right, right.
So I went back to playing the piano, and then about 3 minutes later, the phone rang. And it was my friend Bart saying, oh, my God, I just heard on the radio that they shot John Lennon outside the Dakota. And I went, oh, my God, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Blam, blambity, blam, blam.
Right.
So then I turned on the radio, and sure enough, the DJ on WNEW, my pop station, was talking about it. And just a few minutes later, the report came from the hospital that John Lennon had died.
Wow.
And we had just gotten back that morning from Washington, D.C., because the night before my father had gotten the Kennedy Center honor.
Right.
And my father and I flew back together the next morning. I don't remember why. It was just him and me, but that's what it was. And we walked right past that guy
Really?
because he was always outside the door of the Dakota along with other fans,
Right.
hoping to catch a glimpse, right? We walked right past him. And then, so when I heard the report on the radio, I went running down the back stairwell down to the main apartment where I knew my father was,
Right.
but all by himself. So we sat there together, kind of crying, and I think the only time in my life I drank scotch was that night because it was what my father offered me and it was what he drank.
To console himself.
Yet we consoled ourselves with
Scotch.
scotch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was such a watershed moment for everybody, and especially at your age, But it's
Sure was.
But it's incredible to be so close to it and have it happen in your home.
Oh, it was
basically.
unbelievable. So our housekeeper, who was our nanny, Julia Vega, was also in the house that night.
Right.
And her room in the apartment was next to the kitchen and overlooked the courtyard. So she really heard it, and she went running down there. And she saw poor Jose the doorman and the blood everywhere, and And Jose was having a complete freak out,
Yeah.
as you can imagine, because he felt like it was all his fault somehow, because he
Right.
was right there.
Yeah.
And Julia saw the whole thing,
Yeah.
the whole immediate aftermath.
It's
So we
terrible.
were all freaked out.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure your home must have been taken over by world news for months after that.
Oh, it was a mess. Everybody had to get a special ID card to go in and out of the building. It
Right.
was like an armed camp. And I was actually very sad that I lost my wallet,
Right.
as one does every
Right.
few years.
So you lost the card.
I lost the card. The picture of me on that card, I looked so sad.
Yeah.
But it was kind of historic, It was a real artifact.
Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
lost it.
So whatever happened to that apartment, the apartment of the Dakota? Because your father was there when he passed, right? Or
That's
was
right.
living there
He died in that
in
apartment.
the apartment. So what happened to the apartment?
Well, we couldn't bring ourselves to let go of it. We should have sold it right away. And, that would have really paid the estate tax.
Right.
And instead, we couldn't bear to let go of it. So we hung on to it for about 5 more years, 5 or 6 more years. And then we finally came
Finally
to
did
our
sell it,
senses and we realized, because we didn't really want to live there.
Right.
It was too big and fancy for us. So we did finally sell it. And then we still needed a family headquarters,
Sure.
mainly because of Julia Vega, the aforementioned, who was our nanny and was really the mater familias, like the CEO of our family.
Yeah.
And so we wound up, after we sold the Dakota, or simultaneous to selling it, we bought an apartment in the Park Vendôme building, which is that really big building also with a courtyard, between 56th and 57th Streets east of 9th Avenue,
Okay.
but not all the way to 8th.
Okay.
But it's a really big building. So we bought a wonderful top of the building apartment. As my sister said, it was like it was the antidote to the Dakota, because it was a little dark in the Dakota.
Because you were on a low floor.
Yeah, we're on the low floor, and it's kind of a dark, gloomy building, right? But this was all the light in the world, facing west and facing south, and it was kind of glorious. And it gave Julia a place from which to rule our roost.
Right.
So that went very well, and it was also my brother's office, and
So the 3 siblings kind of shared that apartment?
We shared it.
You shared it. Well, that's great.
We didn't live in it, but it was like our family headquarters. We had a lot of events there, board meetings and musicals and Christmas parties
Right.
and, all that
You were able to
stuff.
carry on the family traditions there.
Yeah, we were.
That's great.
And
That's
we
great.
just sold it this
just sold that.
summer. This summer. So that was a big letting go,
Yeah.
So,
Well, I know that you'd mentioned that you lived in California for a time.
yeah.
But then you came back, obviously, and you're a New Yorker. So what is it that drew you back and keeps you to New York?
Well, at the time, as I mentioned, I was pursuing a career as a singer-songwriter and trying to get my record deal.
Sure, which one goes to California for that.
Right. And I got the record deal. And ironically, the record company was in New York.
Right.
And so was my manager that I acquired. And so I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm moving back to New York.
Right.
And I was not unhappy to do that.
Yeah.
Because I was always going back to New York anyway. I was going back and forth all the time while I lived out there.
Sure.
So I was more than happy to come back to New York, and I moved right down to the Village. The second I could decide where to live, it was always downtown.
Right. Those 15-year-old memories never left.
They pulled me down.
They pulled you down there.
So
Yeah.
first I lived on Jones Street, then I lived on Morton Street.
So since then, you've always lived downtown.
I have.
Yeah.
After that, I moved to Chelsea because it was a little less expensive
Right.
in Chelsea, and I've been in Chelsea ever since.
Okay, great. So what do you love about Chelsea?
Well, one of the things I love about Chelsea is that you can get everywhere right away
right.
from Chelsea.
Very central.
It's so convenient.
Yeah.
It's convenient to downtown. It's convenient to Brooklyn, Queens,
Yeah.
Uptown, Bronx. Like all those trains are very nearby. So I really appreciate that. And my sister lives in Soho, and my brother, until quite recently, lived 2 blocks away from me. So it was really fun to feel
So
like
the
we
whole-
were near each other.
All the siblings are still in the city.
They're all in the city, but my brother moved back to the Upper West Side. I felt like it was a sort of betrayal.
Betrayal, yeah.
Yeah. But he loves it up there, and I have to say that I love it up there now, too.
Yeah.
My
Upper West Side
older
is great.
son just moved to 103rd between West End and Riverside.
Okay.
It's fabulous up
Right.
there. Yeah. So I'm starting to think, if I ever leave this building,
It just gives you
maybe
a little bit more breathing room, you know.
It does, and all the parks.
And the parks.
That's the really great thing
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
Upper
yeah.
West Side.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about what my next stop might be.
Cool. Well, let us know.
Oh, I will.
Yeah. We're here to help.
Oh, thank you.
So where do you go to experience great music in the city these days?
Oh.
Old venues that are still relevant or new venues that are exciting? Give us some...
Well, a little of each.
Right.
I mean, my kinds of music that I spend the most time listening to tend to be, not surprisingly, classical music, because I'm still very plugged into the world of orchestral music.
Sure.
So that takes me a lot to Geffen Hall at Lincoln Center, and it takes me a lot to that cathedral of music, Carnegie Hall.
Of course.
And I'm sorry, you just cannot beat Carnegie Hall for its magnificence and enormousness and history
Of course.
and acoustics. But I'm telling you, Geffen Hall is great. It was just renovated 2 years ago. And, ever since the beginning, when they built it back when my dad was conducting the Philharmonic, they always had problems with the acoustics.
Right.
And it looks like they finally fixed it.
They fixed it.
after all these years.
Great.
And it's a beautiful hall. It's really great there. So I'm in there a lot.
Okay.
In those two places. And sometimes I go to the Met, and sometimes I go to Alice Tully, and sometimes I go to Merkin Hall. So, I get around.
Right.
I get around. And then the other kind of music I listen to a lot is jazz. I have a lot of friends who are jazz musicians.
Wow.
So that gives me a built-in excuse to go to their gigs. And that takes me to Village Vanguard a lot, and it takes me to, it used to take me to Jazz Standard.
Right.
Over on, 27th to 28th Street in Park Avenue South. It was great there. And they had really good food.
Wow.
Because it was downstairs from Blue Smoke.
Okay.
And isn't that what it was called? Yeah, Blue Smoke. Anyway, it closed, alas. But, there's other places. There's Dizzy's in the Time Warner building, or what are we calling that building now? It's not called Time Warner
building.
anymore.
I'm not
It's
sure.
somebody else.
Okay.
Some other giant corporation. Amazon? It doesn't matter. Anyway, there.
Probably named after a bank now.
I just can't remember. But I still refer to it as the Time Warner building. But Dizzy's is a fabulous place to hear jazz.
Great.
And they have these giant, floor-to-ceiling windows that look down Park Avenue South. And it's a huge eyeful, so you're looking at that behind the performing musicians.
Wow, that's incredible.
So it's really cool, and they have great food.
Okay.
So it's a wonderful place to hear music.
Sounds great.
So there's that, and there are, there's Birdland, and there's the Blue Note down in the Village.
Those places have been around forever.
Yeah. So I go to those places a lot.
Cool.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
Cool.
It is cool.
So jazz, classical, any rock music, any.
I'm ironically, since it was my world back when I was trying to be in that world,
Right.
I don't really listen to rock music anymore, but I do. There are some artists that are crossover artists that get on those charts.
Right.
Have you ever heard of Chris Steele, the mandolin virtuoso?
No.
He was in a band called Nickel Creek that I doted on. Then he started a new band called Punch Brothers that I dote on. And I basically follow Chris Steele wherever he
And
performs.
he's a New York artist?
Well, he is now.
Right.
I think he lives in Brooklyn.
Okay.
So, he's played out
so he's
there.
really cool.
He's drop dead cool.
Right.
He's just the coolest guy in the world.
Cool.
So I've gone to hear him in all kinds of different places.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
So any advice for new New Yorkers, how to have a great life in the city? Any tips?
Tips. Well, I would say don't have a car. Don't drive around the city because that's just going to give you a migraine.
And you're going to miss it.
And, you're going to arrive late to everything you go to.
Yeah.
Just don't be in a car if you can help it. The subway, it's sometimes annoying.
Yeah.
But it mostly really gets you to where you're going, most of the time pretty efficiently.
Yeah.
So I'm on the train constantly.
Yeah.
And
you had mentioned before that you love Chelsea because how easily it is to get to all the other boroughs?
by train, yeah.
By train. Do you do a lot of exploration in the other boroughs?
Not as much as I should,
Yeah.
because I get
None
very
of us
stuck.
do. We're all kind of stick to our
Yeah.
borough a little bit.
And I have the greatest restaurant right across the street from my building called Le Zie, Z-I-E. It means the aunts in Italian.
Okay.
There used to be a restaurant down there called Le Madri, which means the mothers
Right.
in Italian. So when this place opened, it was a joke. Like, they're the mothers, but we're the aunts.
Right.
And then Le Madri closed.
The aunt's food might be better.
They are so good.
Yeah.
And so
you
I get
live in
lazy.
a really great restaurant neighborhood.
I do.
You do.
So I get lazy, And,
Sure.
and so the other thing I was going to say, by way of advice, is just walk everywhere if you can.
Absolutely.
And that's really, I walk a lot.
Yeah.
It's so great to live in a city where you can walk around.
Absolutely.
Not like LA
Yeah, not at all.
or many other cities, but New York is a real walking city, and it's so much fun to explore neighborhoods and watch
absolutely.
how they morph from one to the other and all that fun stuff. So
Yeah, and go the slow way, go the long way, and get off at a stop that you didn't plan on, and walk a little extra.
That's right, yeah.
Because you're always going to discover something new.
always.
And then come back a few years later, and it's going to be new all over again.
That's right. That's right.
So I would like you to leave us with one or two really good Bernstein jokes.
Oh,
Do you have any?
I do. Well, my father, what people don't really tend to know about Leonard Bernstein is that he was hilarious.
That came across very much in your book.
Good.
Yeah,
Then I
it really
did my
did.
job.
Yeah.
He was really funny, and he had such a lint collector brain that he would retain everything that he ever heard, every person's name, and also every joke he ever heard. And he collected them. And he collected, the vaudeville routines he saw as a kid. He remembered everything.
Right.
And so we treasured these.
It seemed like a real family
Yeah.
tradition.
So
of
some of
jokes.
them I cannot repeat here.
Yes. Don't give us anything off color.
But I will tell you one of his favorite jokes because it's definitely one of my favorite jokes.
I'd love to hear it.
So, and a lot of these jokes are Jewish, and this is one of them. So you have to imagine these two old guys, Max and Morty. They've been sitting across the table from each other in the garment district for 45 years.
Okay.
And Max...
I can picture it.
Right? Max is the cutter. He cuts the fabric. And Morty is the sewer. Years go by, and there they are, the cutter and the sewer. Years. So Max says, "So, Morty, where did you go on your vacation?" Morty says, "Africa." "Africa? What was you doing in Africa?" "Hunting." "Hunting? What was you hunting?" "Lions." "Lions? Did you get one?" "Ha! Did I get one? One got me." "One got you? Then you wouldn't be living." "You call this living?" You gotta love it.
You gotta love it.
Right.
Because by the time you get to it, the setup is just as funny as the punchline.
I know, right? And, there was this kind of brand of jokes that my parents loved and that their friends loved, like Betty Comden and Adolph Green, and it infused the way they wrote lyrics and books of musicals, and my sister dubbed it surrealist vaudeville.
Yeah.
And that joke has
it does have that
vibe.
surreal quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, like, like those Shaggy Dog jokes where the ending makes you go, ooh. They sort of came out of left field.
Yeah.
We love that.
It was great. Thank you so much. I got to say to everybody, read the book, Famous Father Girl by Jamie Bernstein.
Thanks for the plug.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so much
Roderick.
for being here. I really appreciate it. If you guys enjoyed this, there's other episodes on the More channel. Watch my podcast and other podcasts from Brown Harris Stevens. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.